1906 was one of the most, if not the most, momentous years in San Francisco's history. Before the 7.9 magnitude earthquake struck in the pre-dawn hours of April 18th that year, the city had a population of approximately 400,000 and considered itself a bustling American metropolis. After the earthquake and the subsequent fire that burned for 3 days, much of the city was destroyed. It is estimated that approximately 3,000 people lost their lives in the disaster, and that approximately 80% of the city was destroyed. However, perhaps because the city's southeasternmost neighborhood of Visitacion Valley escaped the terrible destruction, our population grew, at least temporarily, as a result. The Reese Tract, formed the year before, was already busily promoting its sales of the finest building sites for $125, with nothing down and $1 a month, with many taking advantage of this real estate opportunity. There was also an earthquake tent camp in what later became McLaren Park, and some families were even housed in railroad boxcars at the Southern Pacific Rail Yard at the county line, where they continued living for at least several years following the disaster. To our knowledge, there was no organized religious activity in Visitacion Valley at the beginning of the 20th century. However, according to at least one newspaper article, a group from a Presbyterian church in the neighborhood to our north had established a Sunday school in the valley by 1905. Apparently, it was first situated in a building, now a private home, on Campbell Avenue. Another congregant reported the Sunday school sessions later being held on the upper floor of Bayshore Hall at the corner of Leland and Desmond, where a barn and coal yard occupied the lower floor and Vince's barber shop was next door. By 1906, Dr. Lynn T. White had already gathered together a group of residents interested in establishing the valley's first Presbyterian congregation, and the original small church was built at the current location, 240 Leland Avenue. 2 years later, on April 26, 1908, 69 charter members celebrated their church's official recognition by the presbytery. In that same year, a small gymnasium was added at the rear of the building, much to the unhappiness of some nearby neighbors whose gardens were shaded as a result. More additions to the original building, a small kitchen and 2 small side rooms used by visiting seminary students, were made in 1917 as the congregation's numbers continued to grow. But the major change occurred in 1922 when prominent California architect Julia Morgan, today best known for her work on Hearst Castle, was commissioned to design a new church building, the one that is now celebrating its 100th birthday, by achieving historic landmark status. In case you are wondering, it is unknown who the ironer of the blueprints was, or why he or she was doing so. To make room for the new building, the original structure was moved around the corner to Sharin Street, where it still stands, now a private residence. On March 13, 1923, for a total cost of approximately $9,500, which included a grant of $2,800 from a national mission group, the present sanctuary was dedicated. Although Morgan's original design shows a traditional rose window was to be placed prominently in the center of the front facade, there is instead a large window with painted rather than stained glass panels, depicting the parable of the sower. According to the history of its provenance passed down from church members now deceased, the window came from a then-deserted ghost town somewhere in Nevada. In the decades since the Morgan-designed church's 1923 dedication, various modifications, including an exterior repainted several times, new lights, and the 1958 rear extension built by the Men of St. James, whose chapel's open beam ceiling perfectly replicates Morgan's design, have been made to the building. And while the men of the congregation completed the various building projects throughout the years, The women raised the necessary funds through events such as luncheons and rummage sales. But St. James Presbyterian has always been more than a beautiful, historically significant building, of course. At its heart are its congregants, past and present. Let's hear from a few of them. Betty Parshall, a founding member of the Visitacion Valley History Project, has many memories of St. James, from attending its vacation Bible school as a child, to singing in its choir, to serving as a church elder.
I'm Betty Parshall, and I've been at St. James Church since I was 5 years old. When my parents moved to Visitacion Valley, they had previously been attending a Methodist church over in the Ingleside neighborhood somewhere. But anyway, moved here, and I had not been baptized yet, so they came to St. James, got acquainted, eventually did become members, and also had me baptized here. And I can remember that event because I was 5 years old at that time. And I have the baptism certificate. I found that my folks had saved. My mother saved all kinds of documents like this. That was March 24th, 1940. So I was 5 years old, and I do recall being up in front of the church with my parents. Of course, I didn't know what was going on, really. Well, one of the unique features of this sanctuary, on one side, to my right, there's a small office for the pastor. And on the left side in the back, there's a little restroom with a toilet and wash basin. Very seldom, though, did anyone go in to use that during the church, during church services, just in case the noise of the toilet flushing would elicit the wrong kinds of response. When I was, I guess as I was a young adult, I had progressed enough to be a Sunday school teacher. And I had a class of 7th graders. And I enjoyed them. They were delightful and pretty good kids. But one morning I walked into the Sunday school room for our lesson. And one boy, Larry, I remember him with great fondness, said, "Oh, Mrs. Parshall, I have a surprise for you." "Oh, what's that?" And he reached into his shirt and pulled out a white rat, thinking that he was going to scare me, upset me. And I said, "Oh, Larry, how delightful. Let me have the rat." And I took it from him and held it because my kids had pet white rats too, and I was quite used to they make great little pets. So other memories I have to do with singing in the choir. I was an alto, and the choir was sometimes sounded very good, and other times I remember we were screeching out a wonderful song. The minister's son was sitting behind me with his mother, and he was laughing to beat the band because we had a soprano who believed in the louder the better. It was pretty bad. Of course, one hope is that the building will be preserved for the community, and steps are being taken to raise the funding wherewithal to get that accomplished. And I also would like to see St. James hosting more community events.
Alan Chalmers' family also has a long-time connection to St. James. His grandparents were married in the original church building in 1909, and his family were devoted church members in the years that followed. Alan and his brother Gordon later donated 2 windows on the sanctuary's east side in their parents' memory.
I am Alan Chalmers, grew up in Visitacion Valley. My mother grew up in Visitacion Valley. Been going to this church for 82 years. My grandmother came from Edinburgh when she was 2 years old with her mother, and her mother died in 1901 of consumption. And my grandmother moved in with the Cull family on Raymond. And my grandfather came from Nova Scotia early in the 20th century, and he was working on the tunnel the Southern Pacific Tunnel, and he was rooming at the Cull's house, and he and my grandmother got married in 1909. They divorced somewhere around 1920, and my grandmother married who I considered my grandfather. They started coming to church, although my grandmother was baptized Catholic and also my mother Catholic, but they came to St. James. And I started coming at age 5 to Sunday school before my parents decided that they were going to be St. Jamesians. And then they felt a little guilty about sending me at age 5 across the Bayshore Highway to Sunday school, and decided to join the church, and then they became pillars of the church. My brother came too. The first first minister was Dr. Salaji, and he was just as tough as his name sounded. He was a difficult guy. He didn't mess around with Dr. Salaji. No noise in the church or anything. We were baptized here, my brother and I, and Linda and Carolyn, my 2 cousins, at the same time. I was baptized rather late. My brother was 4 years younger. My father won that picture. It's up at the top of the stairs. There was a contest. It was a hand-painted picture. He won the picture and he donated it to the church. They were basically repairing this place every weekend virtually. When my mother died in 2004, my brother and I decided we should have some windows made, and one of my good pals is obviously a major talented guy. He's had windows everywhere, including my house. And so we paid Bob, I think, $2,400 for the windows. And after he finished them, Bob and I installed them, and that was difficult because those are windows on the hinges. And so we would have to go out on a ladder and try to get the window in. I think we eliminated the hinges when we did that. So I said, okay, Bob, you go on the ladder, I'll stay in here. When I gave a talk during the dedication, I said, this side of the church is New Testament because there's crosses in there. That side is the Old Testament because my family is Jewish. I married a Jewish woman with 2 boys. And so that got a little chuckle by the folks. I don't remember the details of taking them out, but we obviously did. I think he used some of the original glass and cut it because it's the same coloration as the other windows. Yeah, I don't want to see anything happen to this. I don't want anything to go bad in this church. God, it still looks great. And Fernando's doing a terrific job. Look at it, looks good.
However, as the demographics of Visitacion Valley changed, older members of the church moved away or passed away. By the 1980s, although the congregation's numbers had shrunk, several active Filipino members remained. As a result, St. James was named a mission church to the larger Filipino community, with the presbytery providing financial support. Mrs. Herminia Aller, now 96, who goes by her nickname Hermie, and was once the church's pianist and choir director, and her daughter Grace reminisce.
Your name is? Herminia D. Oler. And how old? Huh? How old? 96 years old. Oh yeah. And my name is Grace Kalman. Oh, yes, Grace Oler Kalman. And Mom and Dad moved here after we retired from the Army. And they moved here in 1970, and my husband and I got married here in 1971.
At St. James.
At St. James. And it was Pastor Mark Kunrad who officiated the wedding. With Mom, because of the Filipino community here, we found out that the church was right around the corner. So that was a big draw, and that's how we started. I mean, I didn't live here after I got married, but Mom continued. Well, actually, I lived right across the street at 219 Raymond. So I had my first baby here, and my firstborn was also baptized at St. James.
Wonderful.
My youngest daughter is the.
Oh.
You play? I play the piano.
Right.
Yes. But when my daughter is there, because she'll tell me, "Mother, that's wrong." Okay. I did all kinds of job. Somebody's absent, then I fits in.
Here?
Yes. Yes, she did. Yeah. Yeah. I think she was. That's all I did, because I really didn't work, you know. So I think that's why when I was in church. Yeah. In church most of the time.
Good place to be.
In fact, this church, I have all the keys. So they all come to me. Nobody can get in unless they come to me. And Dad actually was a choir director at another church, but he would always also guest direct here too.
Ah.
So my youngest daughter was really the pianist. Oh yes. I was put away. Mom enjoyed going to church there because it was just, a nice walk. And then you were at church, and she would always refuse to take that seat that goes up the elevator seat.
Oh.
Lift chair.
She's like, I can do it myself. And that's what she did. And then my son also is, we are all in the choir. Yes, my brother is also, the family is musical. I would have to say I'm maybe the least, but yes, everybody sings in church. And so. Yeah, it was easy for me because solo for the men is my son. Yes. The choir director, my youngest daughter. And this is, they all have their parts. Yeah, so we always tried to, the whole family would like come and we would all sing a song for special music. I'm the alto, my brother the baritone, my sister on the piano, and Mom the soprano. Yeah. Mostly everything. When we moved in here, there were lots of Filipinos, some of our friends already. So, and then it was close to the school. They were in high school, and the school is very near. And then we bought this house. We were still in the military, and the military was in Presidio.
Mm-hmm.
So we bought this house till we retired. So it was nice. Go ahead, play that. Go ahead, play that. Huh? You want to play that? No. No? I mean, see, when you ask me to play, I forget everything. Yeah, you're a little nervous.
In 1990, St. James's first Filipino pastor, Dr. Jeremias or Jerry Rhesus, was ordained and served until he retired in 2006. Today, the congregation is led by Fernando de Rosario Jr., who shares his story of how he came to St. James and his hopes for the church's future.
My name is Fernando del Rosario. I'm the pastor of St. James Presbyterian Church. I came to the country with my family back in 1994, and we followed our parents and my three siblings here, and we settled here in the Bay Area because they've been here since 1974. So 20 years after we came here, someone calls me, somebody, a distant relative of mine, but someone who knows me quite well, and she knew that I'm a pastor, or an ordained pastor. And she asked me, Pastor, can you help us? Can you come in as a part-time pastor? Because we'd like to reopen the church. This was in early 2021. I was invited formally, officially. And in my heart too, I was praying a lot about it. And so I had peace that this could be something from God, that to be able to help a church that had been virtually closed for 2 years. So in August 15, 2021, that was our first public worship. Maybe the future of this church should be different. Not just to remain the same old Filipino church as they were since the 80s when they took over the predominantly white congregation. It has to be something that reflects, the composition of the church congregation should reflect the demographics of the neighborhood. I mean, there are other churches in this Visitacion Valley. We are just one of them. But if some people would look for something that we could offer and we could, be open, and then that would be the next big thing to thank God for. We are planning to open the church actually to the neighborhood. Other things that people would like to do on a Friday night, for example. We're not going to preach to people because they come to the building. We're going to have them play ping pong here, have a dinner or something, just talk. Sometimes we can have a movie night. I pray that I will have the remaining years here. Very fruitful, very productive, and I'm hopeful that it will be.
Now, 100 years after the Julia Morgan Church was dedicated, St. James Presbyterian celebrates its historic status as the very first landmark building in San Francisco's Visitacion Valley, thanks to the combined efforts of officials, including District 10 Supervisor Shaman Walton and the city's Historic Preservation Commission, local history groups, and especially the supportive members of our community and the church.